Good afternoon, my name is Ken Gordon. Welcome to Words to Action with Ken Gordon. Today's show is a show in honor of Father's Day. For all of our fathers out there, thank you for being a father. Not just a man who babied a child, mind you, but if you're a father, thank you for being a father. So our show today is A Few Good Men, the need and the importance of fathers in the development of our community. So what does that mean? Where does that take us and how do we get there? On Words to Action, we talk about solutions. We don't talk about just talking for the sake of talking. Rather, we talk about solutions. So today, with our guests, we're going to talk about how to be a great father. But not only a great father to our young men, but how to be a great father to our young ladies, to our daughters. We're going to talk a little bit today with a couple of men who, by example, and who through their lives have shown that they are, in fact, great fathers. Now, as I always do, I want to read a quote, and this is a little bit of a long quote, so I want you to stay with me. But when I read this quote while I was doing my research, I said, wow, this catches the very essence of what we really want to talk about. And we're going to ask our guests a little bit about this as well. The quote goes like this: "We black women must forgive black men for not protecting us against slavery, against racism, against white men, against our confusion, and against their doubts. And black men must forgive black women for our own sometimes dubious choices, divided loyalties, and lack of belief in their possibilities. Only when our sons and our daughters know that forgiveness is real, existent, and that those who love them practice it, can they form a bond as men and women that really can save and change our community." That quote was by Marita Golden. And I think that really speaks to the very essence of what we're talking about, because one of the things that we must talk about is how we as black men have fallen down on the job and have not protected our African American women against slavery, against racism, and against the white man. I know nobody likes to talk about it, but it's something we need to talk about, and we will talk about that on Words to Action today. Our first guest today is Shakur-Purvis. And we're going to talk to Mr. Shakur-Purvis about what he sees as the roles of fatherhood and the need and the importance of fathers in our community. My first guest is Shakur-Purvis. Mr. Purvis is the founder of the Urban Life Skills Academy, the founder of Occupy a Street Corner, and someone who is committed to community affairs that relate to at-risk youth and developing strategies for prevention and intervention of delinquency, drugs, and substance abuse. Mr. Markim, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So good to have you on Words to Action today. And first of all, let me just say I appreciate you coming on, and I'm very, very impressed with everything that you are doing in the community as it relates to our youth and as it relates to helping them identify a better way, if you will. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Let me kind of, in observation of Father's Day, let me kind of take a step back. And let me ask you your opinion on exactly what do you see as the role of a father?
The role of the father is very diverse.
Mm-hmm.
The father is a provider, mm-hmm. A confidant, mm-hmm. A role model. Someone who has to exemplify what manhood is about, not just for young men, but for young ladies as well.
Okay, okay. I find it interesting because you said something that I don't think I've heard anybody ever say. And you said a father is a confidant. And it's funny because in most households, when our young people think along the lines of going to tell somebody something, it's not the dad normally. It's like, don't tell daddy. It's like, go tell mom. So why do you say that a father is a confidant?
I think it's essential because you have to have the communication base. The father is someone that you should be able to draw from for wisdom when you're having problems. And a lot of times we kind of see the father as that rigid role.
Right.
And sometimes some people may be more apprehensive or, to think that they can go to their parents or fathers to talk about certain issues.
But it's funny because I was actually listening to something the other day, and we don't find fathers to be that rigid role and someone that you can or cannot go to. That's something that's put in our minds.
Right.
And it's not put into our minds by the fathers, it's put into our minds by the mothers. A lot of mothers like, don't tell your daddy, or, you know, I'm going to get your daddy on you, or whatever. Why do you think it is that mothers tell their children? Why do they put men in that box of that rigid role, don't go talk to your dad, or your dad the disciplinarian? What is the necessity of that?
It could be a number of reasons. One is because in most households, fathers that are active in doing what they're supposed to do are primarily making sure that everything, all the needs are being met, that the family has everything that they need. So mothers will sometime in that mothering role, you know, try to make sure that they take care of the child as far as in the nurturing process, and, you know, if you need something. But I think back to what you said, that it's kind of maybe a myth that people think that the father's more rigid. And in my household with my mother and father, if there was ever a problem, it was always my father was the disciplinarian, and my mother would always say, "I'm gonna tell your father."
Right, so, exactly. And it's almost like that's empowerment that they need. Yes. They always need to have that in their back pocket. But and you said something really interesting. I want to explore that a little bit. So let's talk for a second about what exactly are some of the outcomes for kids that are raised in a household without a father.
It's a really good question, and I've seen examples on various ends of the spectrum. We hear that children who come from single-parent households where the father is not there are often the children that people perceive to experience more problems or not succeed in life. Then you have children who come from single-parent households where there is no father and are able to succeed, you know, with the help of either other male role models or, you know, just the mother providing for them and just being able to learn in that way. So, you know, there are a lot of different ways it can go. So,
and it's interesting because you're right. You hear on one side that people say, well, you know, the kids who are raised without a father in the household, you know, statistically, you know, they end up in prison more, they get in more trouble, etc. But that's not always necessarily the case. So what is it that not having a father in the house, what is it that the child misses?
Not having, like I mentioned earlier, someone to set an example. Someone.
Now, are you talking for boys or girls right now?
Primarily, we think about boys, but it also extends to girls also.
It does?
It does.
Okay.
And when I say...
We're going to follow up on that later, so go ahead.
And when I say boys is because our young black men get sometimes a negative stereotype about them as far as their relationships with women, their ability to treat women in a certain way, or, you know, just all in all together because of the fact of not having that father there.
Who can serve as the role model.
The role model.
But that's assuming the father's not in the household beating somebody.
Exactly.
Okay, that's assuming that he's acting right.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
Because some fathers are in the household and they're a role model, but they're the wrong role model.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because I read a statistic, and I can't tell you where I read it and how long ago, but a statistic said something along the lines of, if you were raised by a father who was a domestic violence perpetrator, if you will, then you are more likely to be that same way. Whereas for someone who's raised in a household where they see their father is very loving, very kind, and who doesn't resort to, you know, to going upside someone's head, as they say, then that typically would be the way that they handle that as well. But let me kind of go back into something that you talked about a little bit earlier, and I want to talk for a second. If you don't have a father, if there's not a male role model in the house, there's not a father in the house, then what can the children, what can the single mother, where can they go to get the kind of positive male role models? Not where can they, let me not even say it like that, where do they?
Usually either the immediate or extended family.
Okay. Like a grandfather?
Grandfather, uncle.
Uncle, okay.
You know, someone who's close to the family, could be just a family friend.
Okay.
And I can say personally in my endeavors, people who I know who have children and the fathers are not there, sometimes I have extended myself to where, okay, if you have a problem, you know, I may not have all the answers, but you can give me a call.
Does that work? I mean, does it have to be the biological father that is part of that household for the person to get that role model and to get it, or can it be a strong man?
I believe fatherhood, just like manhood, is basically fulfilled by the character of the person who claims that role. Because, you know, just being a male alone, you only have to meet genetic criteria
right,
for being a father and a man. So, you know, it has to be. It doesn't have to be the biological father.
Okay.
And we do know situations where the biological father is not always the best situation.
Does having a father in the house guarantee success for the children?
That, you know, I definitely would say no.
Okay.
And that's from experience, from seeing and working with young people who've had fathers in the household. And the situations that may have existed might have been agitated or brought on, or, you know, the father role or parenting role may have contributed to why the situation was the way it was.
So it doesn't guarantee success, so that is to say that the men have a responsibility not to just be present, but there are things that they have to do. So talk for a moment about some of the things that a man in the household needs to do in order to be that good father.
I would say have patience and be consistent. And it's very important why I say patience is because patience doesn't just extend to the child, it extends between the relationship between the father and the mother, and all of the functions of the family system in the household. And the consistency is that a lot of us will hear or have heard in the past, you know, don't do as I do, but do as I say, which is a really hard concept for someone to grasp. So if you want a child to learn how to behave or carry on in life, you need to set that example. Okay. So I like that. Have patience and be consistent. Why did you bring the whole thing about consistency up? Because dealing with children, as a person who works with young people, one thing that a lot of young people who are suffering from whatever their cases may be, along the way have had a lot of inconsistency in their lives with people who were their caretakers or parents, and it can be a problem. And children need that consistency. They need to know that you're going to be who you say you're going to be. You're going to do what you say you're going to do, and they're going to look for that.
So, and I find that to be really interesting. And one of the things that I definitely want to talk about is I want to talk about consistency, but I want to take it from a little bit of a different angle when we talk about consistency.
In regards to consistency, it's important in the household because you want the children to know that what we say, you know, is always going to be what we say. What we do is always going to be, you know, how we do things. And that way, you know, it gives them that structure, you know.
Now, are you sure you want to go with that answer?
I believe so, but I do want to add one thing. I do want to add that. It also applies if the father is outside of the household as well, because we do have those situations if it's a parent that's not there as well.
Are you sure that's your final answer?
Yeah.
And let me tell you why.
Well, I say, so consistency if it's the right behavior and the right.
See, you're trying to anticipate where I'm going, and you haven't hit it there yet. Here's where I'm going with that. Consistency is not just about that, but isn't there supposed to be consistency from male to female? And don't we get in trouble a lot of times with giving our boys more leeway and more kind of freedom than we do our girls? Don't we say to our young men, oh, you know, little Johnny was out having sex the other night. He's a real man. Go, Johnny. Little Jonetta was out having sex. Oh, she's such a slut. So when we talk consistency, tell me your views on that. Do you raise boys differently and give them more freedoms than you do girls?
I think there tends to be in certain households some parenting techniques may be where, you know, fathers or mothers, whatever the situation may be with the boys, they may say, well, the boys can handle more, or the girls, you want to be a little bit more, you know, stressing of a point. I can say personally for myself, I try to be not rigid but firm with my daughters.
Okay.
You know, because of a lot of situations that are out there, not to the extent that they're held accountable more, but just to be a little bit more on point with them.
So I want to talk about that for a little bit. I want to deal for just a little while. I want to stay on the daughters, because so many times we talk a lot about the young man and the absence, when there's an absence of a father, the effects on a young man, but we don't really talk a lot about how it affects a young lady. So let's talk for a second. What are the negative effects for daughters by not having their fathers in the house?
One such situation is that having a father, having a man in a young lady's life gives them a standard of measure to gauge where they can be able to look at other men in their life.
Okay.
So if you have a good male role model or father, you know, whatever that, because it doesn't always have to be biological, but someone who you can measure up to. You know, they always say that young ladies want a man similar to their father. That's their standard of measurement. Right. You know, so having that is important. It's very important. So
you're and I don't mean you personally right now, but so you are a man is in the household. Describe the treatment that a good father displays to his daughter.
Well, I'll keep going back to consistency.
That's good.
And consistency is important.
Okay.
But understanding, stressing so they can understand as a young lady what they should, how they should carry themselves. What they should.
I want to stop you right there for just 1 second, because I think that is so critical. So let's talk for 1 second as a man. How, in your mind, how should a young lady carry herself?
She should carry herself appropriately at all times. And the reason being is because I think we talked about that double standard thing, where if a young lady does something, she's held accountable a little bit more, or people look at her in a negative light. Right. So getting her to understand that, you know, it's because of the double standard sometimes that you always have to be on guard for that, just to protect yourself.
So give me some examples of, do you have a daughter?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so great. Give me examples of the kind of ways that you tell your daughter to carry herself. We talk about this concept of carry yourself. There are people out there who perhaps don't even know what that means, but give us examples of some of the appropriate behavior in the way that a daughter should carry herself that a man should look out for. Not the mother, but a man.
One thing is, and I'll say this, I have 3 daughters. Okay. So thinking like individually, I was just thinking in one specific
Okay,
case.
wait a minute, hold on, I gotta stop you. What are your daughters' names?
Malika,
Maisha,
and Jaleisha.
And Jaleisha.
Yeah.
All right. Hello! All right, go ahead.
You know, just trying to get them to understand that there is often a double standard. It may not be right, but it happens. So you have to understand that you have to protect yourself. Okay. And that's in dress. That's in behavior. Okay. Just little things like that, you know. Especially, I'm a stickler on dress, you know, because a lot of times people will associate you or make assumptions about you.
So tell me what you mean by that. And I need you to be as descriptive as you can. So tell me when you're a stickler.
Watching, they can hear, you know.
If you're a stickler, tell me what you say to your daughters.
Well, I'll say if I see something that if they're wearing, and it may be suggestive, or it could be perceived as suggestive, and you have a right. I want to understand you have a right to wear whatever you want to wear. Okay. But on the other hand, you also have to remember that there's somebody who's going to be reviewing or going to be looking at you and receiving it. Okay. And you want to make sure that what you wear doesn't create a problem for you. Okay. If you're comfortable with it, then wear it. But understand that, you know, just be conscious of, you know, what you wear is a representation of who you are.
So how old are your daughters?
Wow, 20. That's always a tough one. There. We got to roll numbers off.
There you go.
26 and 24 and 19.
All right. So these are young ladies. Right. And so they're out in the world, and they're being judged by how they look, the dress, their dress, etc. What do you think the influences in their day-to-day life? What do you think are the influences or the hints that they had a strong, involved father? What kinds of things do other people see about your daughters that let them know that a man raised them?
My daughters are very strong-minded young ladies. Okay. Very independent. my middle daughter, Myasia, she's a very hardworking young lady. You know, in this economy, it's hard to get children to go out on their own and do their own thing, especially at 24, which is, you know, still a young age.
Okay.
You know, works very hard, own apartment, own car, and it's good, and it's a good example that she has had some type of, you know, consistency and background. You know, not just from myself, mother, and extended family, grandmother, people who are around, and she, you know, she does that. My daughter Malika, who now has a child of her own, is doing pretty good for a young lady at 26 years old raising a child. Daughter Jaleisha is going to college, staying focused, very goal oriented. So you know, you can see where they have taken hold of the things that they were given and progress from there.
And I'm sure that you and your wife are very, very proud of your daughters. They sound like wonderful, wonderful women. And one of the things that I almost just from talking to you and getting a sense from your strength, I can almost tell that your daughters probably, when they meet a man, they began immediately with the dad tape measure, right? The dad yardstick.
So. I hope so.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. I want to talk for just a few minutes about the Occupy Street Corner.
Okay.
I want to talk for just a few minutes about the Urban Skills Academy, and I want to talk for just a few minutes about your personal journey, where it began, and kind of as it took you through adolescence and teenage years, and brought you up into adulthood and into manhood, and that's something that I want to get into with you.
Okay. I'll start with the Occupy Street Corner. It's a fairly new concept that myself, as kind of like a spearhead with a couple other people in the community, you know, we kind of watch things that happen in the community a lot, and I'll give you a perfect example. Trayvon Martin, the situation in Florida. They just had a big national movement about a young man who was, you know, gunned down.
Now, and you're talking about Trayvon Martin.
Trayvon Martin. And yet in our streets, there are young men in most urban neighborhoods who are gunned down very often. And it's usually that when something happens, people get motivated to do something. So Occupy Street Corner was something to get people to think about being proactive versus reactive. You know, instead of something nationally happening thousands of miles away, let's be proactive, try to connect ourselves in the community. So that's what that's about. Urban Life Skills Academy is a private organization that I have, which is basically the services I provide clinically to behavioral health type of organizations. I'm a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor, so you know I do assessments, counseling, and it's my way outside of working, you know, in a structured agency or bureaucratic setting to be able to do different things and apply, you know, my clinical skill level.
So, all right, I get the part about applying your skills and your background and your education, but help me understand for a moment what inspired you to actually start the Urban Life Skills Academy, because you can employ your skills in your job. So, what inspired you to go beyond that into the Urban Life Skills Academy?
Like I said, when I came up with the concept, I wanted to be able to provide additional clinical services. I used to provide contracted services for behavioral health organizations in the form of mentoring, counseling, therapy, and things like that. But there's a limited amount of African American males or service agencies that can go beyond and provide additional services. So it was my way to say, okay, well, let me be able to reach out and make myself available. And let other agencies know that, hey, you know, I can provide these services for you and do that. So it was more to just make sure that a need is being met.
So talk to me for just a second, because we only have a few more minutes left, but talk to me for a second about Mr. Shakur-Purvis's personal journey. What got you to where you are today as a guest on Words to Action?
Wow. It was a true growing process, and continues to be.
Okay.
And that's why primarily most of the work I do is with young people. I was a young person who went through a lot of the same stuff that a lot of young people are going through now. Delinquency, problems in school. I was a teen father.
Okay.
And I had to learn to become a father over the years.
Okay.
And just, you know.
So I want to interrupt you really quickly, and please remember where you are.
Okay.
But I want to go back to something for a second because I have to.
Gotcha.
You were a teen father, but your life didn't end.
No.
You were a teen father, and you still turned out pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Very awesome.
Thank you.
How? As a teen father, your life doesn't end there?
It doesn't.
Okay.
It doesn't, and I say for myself, it's a personal process, you know, and that's why I always talk about patience and consistency.
Okay.
Because I think about when my parents parented and raised me and my brother and sister in the household. They were traditional Southern people, you know, they planned to have a family.
Okay.
At a young age, you know, nothing was planned. So it was like I didn't have the skills, even though I was a young person. I had to learn how to, and it wasn't like when I did that it was planned. I wanted to give up everything at the same time. I still wanted to do this and do that, and then I had to learn that, look, this doesn't work. Let me be a little bit more consistent.
Okay.
And you know, do what I can.
Okay, all right. So let me jump back in from where you were. So you were a teen father, and you were moving down the road, and what happened for you next?
I say a growing process, a learning process. I've experienced, like I said, a lot of the same things other youth have experienced. You know, substance abuse, peer pressure, and after a while of getting the consequence as a result of the behavior,
right.
You know, I had to learn in order to do and get different results, I had to do something different in my life.
Okay.
Education, I learned in my life is very important, and it has helped me open a lot of doors. I was one of those kids who sat in school, and school was the farthest thing from my mind.
Okay.
But when I learned that I had the ability to learn and continue to grow, you know, I went back to school, went back to college, and you know, just tried to use that, you know.
And that's actually a really good kind of segue in our last couple of minutes here, because here at Words to Action we're about solutions. So talk to me for a moment about what young people can do in order to kind of redeem their lives, and then kind of mix into that, if you will, some solutions for men on what we can do to become better fathers.
Speaking for young people, not buy into the negative stereotypes that come about, because a lot of times for our youth, and I'll speak in my sense, we become our own worst enemy.
Okay.
When we buy into that, and we can make mistakes.
Okay. Okay.
So understanding that we have the ability to come back from whatever it is.
Okay. So for our young people, don't buy in, you know, as they say back in our day, don't believe the hype. I guess you don't remember that, do you? Yeah, I remember. I'm a little bit older than you, maybe. All right, so let's talk for a moment about fathers. Obviously today we're talking about a few good men, the importance of fathers in the development of our community. So what are some pointers you can give to men to become better fathers? In
regards of being better fathers, I go back again to having patience, being consistent, being communicators, opening lines of communications. Because a lot of times, like we said, children don't feel that they can talk to us about certain things.
Right, right.
You know, and then with media and all the other things that have their attention nowadays, you know, we want to let them know, listen, if you have any questions, any concerns, feel free to talk to me.
Absolutely.
You know? And it's, you know, those are some basic things.
Okay.
Some basic things.
You have been a wealth of information and knowledge. I appreciate it. Patience, consistency, and communication. 3 things that men can do to become better fathers, and I appreciate that. Mr. Shakur-Purvis, thank you so much for being a guest on Words to Action. My next guest is someone that has been the greatest role model that I've ever seen, and someone that I think is truly you talk about the role model, you talk about setting the bar. My next guest is someone that has set the bar and who is, in my opinion, the best father in the world. My next guest is someone that I've described as the best father in the world. And I can say that with a little bit of prejudice and with a whole lot of bias, because I'm talking about none other than Ken Gordon Sr. As you know, I'm Ken Gordon Jr. with Words to Action, so that means if there's a junior, there has to be a senior. And I'm so fortunate to have as my guest on today's Father's Day show none other than Ken Gordon Sr. He's a military man. He did more than 20 years in the United States Air Force. He is a true father, someone who was involved in every aspect of our lives, from coming to our concerts when we were playing our instruments, not very well, to coming out to seeing us acting in shows, not very well, to coming and seeing us playing on football fields, on baseball diamonds, on basketball courts, and again, not necessarily well, but you would never know it by him. My very special guest is none other than my own dad, Ken Gordon Sr. Dad, welcome and thank you for being on Words to Action. So I want to talk a little bit about, I mean, this is a Father's Day show, and there's no way that I can do a Father's Day show without bringing you on, because you are a role model. You are someone that I pattern myself after, someone that I hope my son patterns himself after. And I used to always say in my lifetime, if I could be half the man that you have been, then I will be a phenomenal dad. But one of the things that really sticks out in my mind is you used to repeat something to me over and over and over again, a promise that you made to me. Can you share for a moment the promise you made to me and why you made, and first of all, let me just say, do you know what I'm talking about?
Of course.
Okay, all right. I don't want to make any assumptions here, but can you share the promise you made to me and what made you make that promise to me as your son?
As a man watching how some young men turn out, I made a vow to myself and to God and to you that I would educate you and keep you out of jail. And I thank God that that truly happened. And
I'm going to jump across you really quickly, because so educate me and keep me out of jail, aren't those are kind of two opposite things that there's a whole lot in the middle. So what made you pick those two things?
Number one, in today's society, or when you came along, it was necessary that you would have a good education. Secondly, a lot of our young black men are in jail, and I've got a brother whose son is in jail,
and he's been there quite a while.
He's been there quite a while.
Yeah.
And I just did not want that to happen to you.
So as a father, what kinds of things, when you make a promise like that, that's a pretty big promise. I mean, when you say, I'm going to educate you, okay, so that is kind of within your purview. But when you say, I'm going to keep you out of jail, you couldn't walk with me every day, every step of the way, everywhere I went. So how is it that you were, because I've never been to jail, never been arrested, never been in jail, never been detained under my name. No, I'm kidding. but how is it that you were able to make a promise like that when so many of our young men go to jail, but not necessarily of things that they've done?
One of the mistakes that a lot of men make, especially those that stay at home, they wait until you're 17 or 18 years old to start trying to train you. You have to train a child when they're real young. At the time you start talking, the first time you start speaking their first words, that's when you start training a child, when they can comprehend. You tell them, I'm going to educate you. I'm going to keep you out of jail. They look at TV and they see all kinds of people going to jail, and they understand exactly what it is that you're talking about. Once they get older, they remember the things that you said. In a lot of instances, they will not put themselves in a position where they can end up in jail. And you started very early with me. You put those things into my head. But here's the really interesting part. I know you made a vow and you promised that I'm going to educate you and keep you out of jail. But you didn't just talk about keeping me out of jail. You used to talk a lot about the educational part and what that meant. So can you talk for just a second about why the education made so much difference? Well, the more educated you are, the more likely it is that you're going to end up with a good profession. Uneducated young men and uneducated young women, they will accept anything that come along. But when you're educated, you can be selective. Right. And I thought personally that if my son was educated, he could be very selective, and I thank God that you have been.
Well, and I attribute that to you. As I kind of grew up through the years, and I kind of went through varying degrees of challenges, if you will, you've never been a man of many words, but you are always there. You are always strong. But one of the things that I remember about you, and I want you to talk for just a second about when we talk about this whole issue of a role model, is your work ethic. So can you talk for just a second about the vow that you made to Mom, my mother, when it came to her and the family?
I told your mother, I vowed this,
that one day she may leave me, but I would never ever leave her and my children. I would always be there to support her and to support my children. I would always be there to do what my father taught me, and that was to get a job and to work. A lot of instances, I find young men that don't want to work. They have babies, but they don't want to get out there and work. But because my dad was the type of man that worked all his life, I know nothing but working.
Right. And not only that, I mean, it wasn't just enough that you were in the military, but growing up, I always remember you holding several jobs.
Correct.
And not because we didn't have anything, but I mean, even in the military, we were living a good lifestyle. What made you have? I mean, I remember you scrubbing floors. I remember you being a janitor. But we had a very nice lifestyle. What made you do all of those additional things, even though we were already pretty well off?
Because I had a son coming along, and I wanted my son to understand that it didn't matter what type of job you had as long as you had a job. The reason why I educated you was so that you could have your pick of the types of jobs that you would prefer to have.
So I want to go back, because one of the things that's kind of sticking in my mind for a moment. We talk about A Few Good Men, the importance of men, fathers in the development of the community, and I think about the fire that you and Mom had. I don't know that I was born yet,
Right.
But I guess my older sister, she may have been. But my mother tells that story a lot. Mom tells that story a lot, and she talks about the fire. So for just 1 second, I'm going to kind of set it up for you, and then I want you to kind of talk about what led you to say to her what you did. But essentially, there was a fire in your home. Both of you were very young. There was a fire in the home. The house caught on fire. Both of you ended up making it out, but the house, if I'm not mistaken, pretty much burned to the ground.
Yes.
My mother was outside. She had barely been able to get out with all the clothes on her back, and I think she was barefooted. And she was on the phone to her mother.
Correct.
You overheard her on the phone to her mother. What did you say to her?
I told her, I heard her say to her mother that our house had caught on fire and that we had nothing. And I told my wife, I said, don't you worry about that. I will make sure that you're taken care of. And I meant every word of that.
I mean, standing there with the house burning, neither one of you had very many, you had the clothes on your back. And at that very moment, the only thing that you could really come at her with was, I got you.
I've got your back.
Yeah, and I think that's phenomenal, and I think that it wasn't a time for you to begin weeping and moaning and, oh, I can't believe it all burned down, and what happened to my iPad, and Lord, I had all these tunes on there, but rather I got you. Is that something that I do want to be controversial. Is that something that a lot of men are missing nowadays?
I think so. I think in a lot of instances they're concerned about themselves. They're not concerned about that woman. They can walk away and leave that woman with those children and let her fend for herself. I could never do that right there, because my dad was a stay-at-home dad. My dad stayed there for over 50 years. And I thank God I've been married to my wife, your mother, for 48 years.
And I want to talk I want to talk about the impact of you on my sisters. And I want to talk about kind of how you were a father to the daughters, and I also want to talk to you a little bit about kind of the challenges, if you will, of being a good father amidst all of the other distractions.
Okay, well, there were plenty of distractions. On the job, being in the military, I had to go to Vietnam, and therefore going to Vietnam, I was concerned about my family. So therefore, before I left, I made sure that my family had a nice place to stay, nice automobiles to drive, make sure my children understood that Dad was going to be leaving for a little while, but Dad would be coming back.
So one of the things, you talk about the fact that you went to Vietnam, and one of the stories that I'd like for you to share with our viewers for a moment is you had a very unique way of being a father and even the disciplinarian from Vietnam. So can you talk a little bit about what you did? Prior
to going to Vietnam, when I would talk to you all, it depended on the tone that I would use when I talk.
Let me just say this before you go any further. Do not say my nickname, okay? Just do not tell people what you called me growing up. Anyway, go ahead.
At any rate, when I went to Vietnam, we would make cassette tapes. That was before all of this
Technology,
CDs and
right?
technology came along. I would send back a tape, and on that tape, I would say things like, "Kenny," and he would look. I said, "You stop doing this, or you stop doing that, or your mother told me this, or your mother told me that." And she would always tell me it would get your attention. When I talked to my daughters, I'd say the same thing. Vaughn, so and so and so and so.
Right.
Gayleen, so and so and so. That would get their attention. Then I could say whatever it was I needed to say.
And I think that's interesting because fathers have to be very creative, and they have to figure out how best to discipline each individual child. I mean, do you really think, and I don't want this to be a setup question, but do you think that a man's style fits all his kids, or do you have to vary your style, your discipline, and the way you raise your kids based on their personality, or do they need to adjust to you?
You deal with them based on their own individual personality, because there are individuals. With my daughters, I could deal with them in a different manner. With my son, I dealt with you in a different manner. One of the things I did where my daughters were concerned, I treated my wife, your mother, a certain way, and I would let my daughters see the way I dealt with your mother, and as a result, I could deal with them in a similar manner.
Okay.
I didn't have to scream and holler at none of my children. I could just use tone in my voice.
So Mr. Shakur-Purvis, our previous guest, talked a little bit about raising his 3 daughters and the way he would talk to them about the way they carry themselves and the way they dress. Can you talk for just a second kind of about that? I mean, his comments. I mean, is that something that you agree with? Is that something that you, the way that you dealt with your daughters in the same way?
In today's society, what he said is excellent. I agree with it 1,000%. I came along in a different era, and when I came along, it wasn't necessary to tell your daughters the things that you tell them now, because, as I said, you started out young, very, very young with them, teaching them how to be a young woman, teaching them how to carry themselves. And as they got older, that stuck with them.
Well, interestingly enough, when we were coming along, obviously we were in church 6 days a week.
Correct.
And you kept us chained to the church.
Correct.
But the I guess the religion that we were had some very strong feelings about women and their dress and their style, etc. But getting away from that, moving away from that, just talking about the Ken Gordon way of raising a daughter. Talk for just a second about what that looked like.
Well, with my daughters, it was just, as far as I was concerned, I couldn't raise them based on what somebody else said about their individual daughter. My daughters had their own personality, so I had to deal with them that way right there. I will never forget my oldest daughter. She was playing with fire, her and 2 or 3 other girls. And the commander wanted to make an example out of my daughter. And I told him, I said, "You'll never make an example out of my daughter, not because of that right there."
Right.
And I stood up to him, and he appreciated that. And my daughter appreciated that, because she'll talk about it now.
Right.
"Dad, you stood up for me."
I appreciate that, and I do have to say that one of the biggest reasons I wanted you on today was because I didn't want someone to come on here and talk conceptually or theoretically or even philosophically about being a father. I wanted someone to come on here who is a father and who is a great father. So,
Right.
Dad, thank you for being on my show. I appreciate you being on here, and I hope to have you back
I
again real
appreciate you
soon.
having me.
So, one of the things that we've learned is that consistency is important, being present is important, and being the kind of a father who stays engaged and communicates. These are some of the things that our guests today have said it takes to be a great father. The show this week has been A Few Good Men, the importance of fathers in the development of our community. Our guests talked a lot about being patient, being consistent, and communicating, and the necessities of fathers doing so. They talked about the fact that being a father isn't just for our young men, but being a father is for our young women as well. When you're a father for our young women, then you set the bar and help them understand how they should look for their mate, what they should expect, and what they should never, ever allow. A good man, a good father, is a role model and is someone that is a confidant,
but also someone that is a role model and present at all times. At the end of the day, the solutions that we come away with from today's show is that fathers should be patient, consistent, and present with open solutions. If you're a man out there and you're listening to me and you're watching this broadcast, I want to encourage you, be present, be there, not just in body, but in mind and spirit. What I have to do is I have to say that there are certain times when I just turn my cell phone off. There are certain times which absolutely belong to my family. You have to be very consistent. Consistent in the way you deal with your daughters and the way you deal with your sons. And you must be patient. You know, I wish all kids got it immediately. I wish they got it even after the 20th time that you told them. If someone can figure that out, bottle it and sell it, you'll be a millionaire. A billionaire even. But the truth is that it just doesn't work that way. Kids require patience over and over and over again. A good father, he has plenty of it. When we talk about solutions, we talk about training up your children at an early age. Let me tell you something. If you wait until they're a teenager before you start cracking down, you can forget it. I've heard people talk oftentimes about the fact that if you don't have it in your kids by the time they're 2 or 3, they're pretty much gone. Well, maybe your child is 4 or 5. It's still not too late. Train up a child in the way they should go. Be there, be present. And then when all of that is over, said and done, understand that every child is different. As a father, you must discipline and raise your children. You must encourage them. You must be there for them, each individually. If you had bad daughters like my father did, then you know what? You have to be there for them. If you have a phenomenal son like I was, you got to be there for him. And I'm allowed to say that because it's Words to Action with Ken Gordon. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful week. And now it's time to take words and turn them